This is Ag Matters PM from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, brought to you by the Iowa Soybean Association, your daily recap of the information that affects Iowa's farmers, producers, and consumers, right here in the heart of the heartland. With reports from our award-winning broadcast team of Dustin Hoffman and Riley Smith. Now, from the IARN studios in Des Moines, here's Dustin Hoffman.
Well, good day, everybody, and welcome to Ag Matters PM from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. I'm Dustin Hoffman. Today is Thursday, June the 23rd, 2022. We're so glad you could join us. Coming up, I will be talking international marketing with the National Pork Board. We'll also have your ag weather outlook. But first, let's kick things off and run down those markets. It's time now for the Ag Matters PM Closing Market Summary, your source for market analysis and settlement prices from the day's trade in Chicago, courtesy of the folks at agmarket.net. Well, we're at the end of the trading day for Thursday, and we're talking with Brian Splitt of agmarket.net. And Brian, I tell you, those markets, they remind me of the Wile E. Coyote cartoons growing up and going right off the cliff. What's going on?
Yeah, it was kind of an elevator shaft today, but I think, when we have time to reflect on what happened this week so far, we had a long weekend. Over the weekend, the weather models got less threatening, took some of the temperatures, reduced them a little bit in the shorter term forecast. Recently, we saw the potential for some thunderstorms in early July added to the mix. And so I think what started as a market that took some weather premium out really snowballed into something more than that, because we are at the end of the month, it's the end of the quarter, and with options expiring today, I think you had what you would call a gamma squeeze on sold puts. So imagine for a second you sold bean puts at $16 in July months ago, and just a few days ago those puts were worth a fraction of a cent. Now, if you never got out of those because it looked like those were going to expire worthless a week ago, if you never bought them back, they started to increase in value substantially, going from a half cent to 2 cents to 5 cents, trading up over 15 cents today. And so a fund that's short all of these options will then start to sell futures to cover the delta of these options that are gaining in value. And I think you had that happen in corn, in soybeans, and in wheat all at once. Now, we did the same exact thing last year. We made a move from about mid-June into June 24th, and that was a Thursday. Today's June 23rd, which is also a Thursday, by the way. Corn broke about $1.10. From that Thursday to the following Friday's high, we went back up about 97 cents of that. And then we came out of the 4th of July weekend with another gap lower, and then that was it. That was toast from there. So I think with the report next week, with the scope of the move that we had this week, with the second driest June in the corn belt in the last 125 years, I think this market will recover next week into the report. But I do think we are now in a sell the rally environment, and it's going to take an awful bullish weather forecast to make this market want to make new contract highs after this correction we've seen.
All right. So when we look at the elevator prices, for example, Brian, when we look at basis, we see that some of those elevators are basing that price off of what the July contract says, and there are others that are using the August. Is there a reason for that, especially when we're still looking at being in June?
Yeah, so when we had the invasion of Ukraine and the market really started to get nutty, a lot of the cash market moved their bids off of July, and actually at that point we were going off of May. So a lot of them moved their old crop bids and went straight past July and into the September. Some of them, stayed off the July contract, but this is a way for them to not have to deal with the volatility of the front month contracts. And then what they'll do is they will move their cash bid off of the next contract. So, for corn, that would be September, for example, and then adjust the basis accordingly.
All right. So now moving over to livestock, usually when we see grains go down, livestock goes up. Was that the case today, or did something different happen?
No, I mean, you had feeders, a little positive. To be honest with you, I didn't see the close. I was kind of focused on the grains late in the day, but I know they were higher for a lot of the session, but not the type of gains that you would like to see with corn down nearly 50 cents on its lows. And then when you look at the lean hogs, that market was under a substantial amount of pressure. And so I think there's another element to the market right now, Dustin, and that is you have the Fed saying, hey, for a long time we wanted inflation. We had our inflation targets. We weren't meeting those targets. And then COVID happens and we print a ton of money, and then we have supply chain issues, and then inflation happens. Inflation's transitory. No, wait, inflation's out of control. And now the Fed's job is to make inflation go away. And so that's another reason why I think in the big picture here, we're going to go into a sell the rally type of a market, because that's what the Fed policy is driving. We're no longer where the Fed wants inflation. We're in a point where the Fed wants to get rid of inflation. And so our buddy Jerome Powell is going to make it difficult for those that have the inflationary trade on to make money in that trade. So you may have some markets that have their own individual fundamentals that may warrant them, rallying at times where other commodities won't. And I think the grains are in that category where the funds held on a little bit longer than they did in some of the other markets. But look at what happens when they get a taste of a better weather forecast. They liquidate aggressively. A market I've been watching that has a massive head and shoulder top is cotton. And I think cotton is probably the canary in the coal mine as far as what the funds are going to do to the market if they get concerned about the macro picture. They took cotton all the way down to the 200-day moving average today. That's like D's corn going down to 610.
That's definitely things you don't want to hear. So obviously farmers, producers, investors are going to have to be prepared for anything right about now. And obviously they're going to need to probably revise some of their marketing strategies. If they want to do that with the folks at agmarket.net, how do they get in touch?
You can call us on the general line at 844-4AG-MARKET, so 844-424-6758. You can reach me directly at 815-665-0463. Check us out online, www.agmarket.net.
All right, Brian. Well, thanks so much for the information as always. Have yourself a good weekend, and we'll talk to you real soon.
Sounds great, Dustin. Appreciate it. Thank you.
That again was Brian Splitt of agmarket.net. Let's look at the closing numbers, courtesy of the folks at Bar Chart. July corn was down 21 1/4 at 746 3/4. December down 38 1/4 at 655 1/2. July soybeans down 59 1/2 at 1593 1/4. August down 56 3/4 at 1507 1/4. November new crop down 61 cents at 1415 1/2. Soy meal was down $9.30 to 406 even per ton. Soy oil down $3.37 to 65.51. Chicago wheat down 39 1/2 at 949 1/4. Minneapolis down 26 at 1079 3/4. Kansas wheat is down 35 at 1010 3/4. Oats down 34 at 550 1/2. August live cattle were down $1.05 at 133.87. Feeders were up $1.70 at 174.85. Lean hogs were down $3.30 at 108.55. Pork cutouts down $3.07 at 111.15. Class 3 milk up a penny at 24.32. And that's been a check of our ag market recap. And we're going to take a short break and hear from our sponsor. That is the Iowa Soybean Association and the Soy Checkoff. When we come back, I will be talking with Dr. David Newman and Dr. Clay Eastwood of the National Pork Board as we talk about foreign markets. This is Ag Matters PM.
Iowa Soybean Association is driven to deliver for Iowa's 40,000 soybean farmers. We're proud to provide objective agronomic research, a helping hand with soil and water stewardship, and timely industry news powered by the Soybean Checkoff. Learn more at iasoybeans.com.
Welcome back to AM/PM from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. I'm Dustin Huffman. Earlier this month, we had the World Pork Expo at the Iowa State Fairgrounds in Des Moines. We had the chance to talk with the National Pork Board about different issues that are going on in the industry. And today we're talking about international marketing with Dr. David Newman and Dr. Clay Eastwood. And here's what they had to tell us. Talking with David Newman and Clay Eastwood here, talking about obviously diversification with markets is a big deal. And we've been talking about it all day with producers and people in the industry that trade's been an interesting situation and stuff. So what are we looking at for keeping the ball rolling here in 2022?
Yeah, so we're coming off a couple of really record years for U.S. pork exports. 2020 was a record year, and we had another record year in terms of value in 2021. Total exports in 2021 equated to $8.1 billion back to the U.S. pork industry. In 2022, we're facing a lot of headwinds. There's a lot of things happening in the global marketplace, but the good news is that demand is strong. So that's a great story for us internationally. And you mentioned diversification, and that's absolutely a part of our strategy. And as we work with our partners at the U.S. Meat Export Federation, we're really focused on making sure we have not only a diverse set of markets, but that we're diversifying cuts within a market. So, China's been a big story for the last several years. That market has obviously shifted a good bit, but variety meats are still very much important going into that market. And then places like Mexico. Historically, that's very much been a bone-in ham market for further processing. But we're really excited in some of the work that we're doing at the National Pork Board in partnership with some USDA grant funding and with our partners at USMEF is actually trying to increase value for bone-in pork loins. So working with them, doing technical assistance with customers and importers, trying to diversify that business for cuts in a very important market for U.S. pork exports.
Yeah, it's, you mentioned you're talking about interesting times in trade. Post-COVID or wherever we're at in COVID, this is just a very interesting time in general. And so, as Clay alluded to, there's a lot of opportunity. From a producer's perspective this year, we're going to export 30% of our total production. And that number has been climbing exponentially year on year for a very long time. I think some of the big wins here are, if you look at the trade data that just came out today, you would look at that and say, yeah, there's a lot of volume down, but value is up. So that's a great story to tell. We know that there's a lot of things going on in China, for example, African swine fever, continued lockdowns because of coronavirus, all those unknowns. But at the same time, demand has never been so good. So our global demand is great. Our domestic demand is on fire. And so all of those things, coupled in with these unique situations going on around the world, present a very good opportunity for U.S. pork.
And going back to, to the whole idea of, we learned obviously during those trade wars that you can't have all your eggs in one basket. COVID breaks out. That was tough for everybody to try to figure out. But where do you find that way of breaking into some of these new markets? Obviously China, like you said, China, Mexico, two big, huge players. But obviously with China, when you take that market away, you still have to move this pork somewhere. How do you go about finding some of these new markets or marketing it to areas that maybe aren't as big of buyers as they normally are?
Yeah, that's a great question. And obviously our partners at the National Pork Producers Council play a key role in terms of obtaining and maintaining market access. But after that, it's really us and USMEF, and that's where the education, the promotion, the marketing really comes into play. There's a lot of opportunity in places like Central and South America. We know that, as their economies continue to grow and consumers have more money to spend, one of the first places they turn is to more animal protein. So places in South America like Peru, historically their pork consumption is very low compared to, say, a Colombia or a Chile. And so we know that that's a great opportunity for us to go in there and start working with customers and importers on education, technical assistance, and really start creating those relationships with potential buyers.
Yeah, and I would say another thing is, you asked, how do we open market access? U.S. Meat Export Federation, who's one of our largest partners when it comes to our international trade strategy, has offices all over the world, from Mexico to Durban, South Africa, Singapore, the Philippines, China. And so we use them and we leverage producer dollars along with programs through USDA, in most cases that actually double the dollars that we're able to use, and we're able to actually have boots on the ground in market and understand who the competitors are, understand where the opportunities are. Recently, Clay mentioned Peru. We were in Lima, Peru here several weeks ago, where there's a tremendous amount of opportunity, and we were working face to face. We weren't Skyping, we weren't Zooming, we were actually face to face with importers and packer processors in market. That's a crucial piece to opening these in market face-to-face meetings. And we were doing carcass fabrication on primals and talking to them about how they can merchandise U.S. pork in a way that added value to them. And that type of work, that type of in-market strategy in combination with our international marketing strategy we deploy from here, those two things are a lethal weapon when it comes to opening up future markets.
Now, we also talk about the markets. Obviously, everybody's got their own, customs, the foods they like to eat, and we talk about variety cuts. You explain to maybe some of the people that aren't quite as familiar with that, what that it means and how big of a market that can be for things that we maybe wouldn't see at the meat counter in America.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, from a perspective of a meat side, I think that you pointed out something interesting. Your average American doesn't eat a lot of variety meats, and when we say variety meats, what does that mean? That means hearts. That means kidneys. That means livers. It can even mean parts of the intestine. It can also be ears and skin and a variety of other things. So culturally speaking, there are certainly populations and demographics around the world that have traditionally eaten those things. And that is a tremendous market. And it's tremendously important to producers, because when we get a value sheet or a cut sheet back selling hogs, for example, we don't necessarily see that individual value of some of those variety meats. But what we do get paid for is that drop credit or the byproduct value that's there. And whether it is chicken feet in the poultry business, or beef livers going to Egypt, or it is pork variety meats that are going to Africa, which is a huge market for them, that just presents a tremendous amount of opportunity that quite literally drives value all the way back to producers in the production system here in the U.S.
And when you think about the production side of it, obviously producers want to make sure that that animal that they're raising, that's being raised for one thing, is being used to its maximum potential too.
Most definitely. And, David really hit on this, but it's all about that carcass balance. And where international really comes into play is making sure that we're able to merchandise all these cuts when and where they have a value and have a place. And one of the interesting and fun things about, exports is that it's always changing. And anywhere we can bring value back to the U.S. producer, that's where we're headed.
And you talked about also the economies of some of these countries growing, and obviously now that's going to maybe mean that they're going to go for the pork chops, the ribs, the loins, things like that. The things that maybe economically the reason they weren't buying was because they could only afford the variety meat cuts that we used to seeing. How are we seeing that change as well as those economies grow? I mean, obviously there's going to be that tradition of hey, I grew up eating this, I still like that, but gosh, smoked ribs, you can't go wrong with ribs or pork loin either.
Yeah, if we can, draw some of the positives as a result of COVID. I mean, people stayed home and there was a lot of interest in cooking, and probably a renewed interest for some in being creative. And so I think that's a win for exports and what it means for U.S. pork on the tables of consumers around the world. So I think the consumer of yesterday is not the consumer of today. And so I think there's just a lot of opportunity to continue to educate about the versatility of U.S. pork, but all of the other great things that go along with it, like our sustainability story, and we're a great supplier and reliable supplier of high quality and safe protein.
And to put into perspective, in the U.S. we eat on average around 220 pounds of meat a year per person. The highest per capita consumption of meat on the planet. So even with that said, domestic demand is huge. But let's use a country like Peru or Chile, right, or Colombia. The average consumption is less than 20 pounds of protein, and so it varies by country. But the point is that you're still going to see traditional things like variety meats, no different than we have traditional foods that we have eaten in different geographies all over the U.S. But you're right. What you do see now is an opportunity for the fresh meat game. So loins, hams, picnics, butts, ground pork, a lot of opportunities there globally. And as people rotate to that, and as their economies improve, it really puts pork in a unique position, because it gets people thinking beyond poultry, right? Just something that does have a quality story to tell, that is still price sensitive against something like beef, right? So it does uniquely position pork globally in our key market areas.
So, talking about, obviously producers being involved, obviously they're helping fund those checkoff dollars that are going for these promotions, but is there anything they can be doing, the average farmer that we're going to be seeing that's around Iowa, is there anything they can do to help that initiative a little more, in the day-to-day lives for themselves?
Well, the first thing they can do is from a National Pork Board perspective is they can sign up for AgView. And AgView is a program that we've worked on for years. When I was on the board of directors at National Pork Board, we helped to develop that program. And we need producers signing up for AgView because they're working with their state animal health officials. In the event that we would see an outbreak of African swine fever in the United States, we would have instantly limited access to the global marketplace. So it would be crucial at that point in time to have a great communication network amongst veterinarians, state animal health officials, and federal officials so that our international market team and U.S. Meat Export and everyone we've talked about would be able to reopen market access. So continue to be diligent on biosecurity, sign up for AgView, and that's putting and deploying checkoff dollars in a very smart way.
And the other way is through our on-farm sustainability reports, signing up for those. So I mentioned sustainability earlier. That's becoming increasingly important to our international customers and consumers as well. And so as we think about sharing our U.S. pork story with those international consumers and customers, it's really about, having that data to back it up. And so the more we get involvement with our producers, having those on-farm sustainability reports and can speak to the industry as a whole, that really strengthens our story with our international audience.
All right, and so kind of getting close to wrapping up here, obviously you talked about came off some great years for exports. We're having a little bit of headwind, but yet the demand is still there. We're still seeing that people are wanting to buy quality. I'm going to ask you both to tell me what is something that's really got you excited for going forward here as part of this plan, or what you see coming in exports in the marketplace for the pork industry.
Well, I think there's a lot of excitement on a lot of fronts, but I'll speak a little more to this program we're doing in Mexico. Mexico, like I said, has historically been a key customer of U.S. pork, but not only are we focused on the diversified set of countries and markets, but it's really about how can we create new value within a market that's been a great customer of ours. And so really continuing to focus on a program that we've implemented the last couple of years in Mexico with USMEF and trying to create new business for bone-in pork loins. That's not a cut that they've historically used, and you often hear producers or anybody in the pork industry say that the loin is the drag on the cutout. So where can we create new demand for the pork loin? And that's what we're trying to do, and we've had great success thus far.
I think what's exciting is that, from a meat scientist background and a producer background, you're historically trained about these key markets, right? And that's Japan, that's Mexico, and that's China. And, demand, volume, and value as well. What excites me is looking at the market research we've done about who our customer of the future is going to be. A great example of that is the opportunities in Africa. So we know now that Africa is a huge consumer of variety meats, very similar to the story we tell about the Chinese market. But looking forward into countries like Nigeria, for example, we see that the customer of the future may actually gravitate from traditional countries like Japan, where you actually have a declining population, to countries like Nigeria in Africa, where you have an increasing population of people who are also gaining affluence, so economically. And I don't know, it excites me because, we mentioned earlier, all your eggs are not in one basket that way. And whenever you see the opportunities of distribution for U.S. pork on multiple continents, that speaks volume to the value story we can tell here.
All right, so we can remind our viewers one more time where they can find more information, find some more of these resources to help the industry along and help tell their story as well.
Most definitely. Everything we've talked about in terms of what producers can do can be found on porkcheckoff.org. Would be the great place to start and go and find that information.
That again was Dr. David Newman and Dr. Clay Eastwood of the National Pork Board. Now let's run down that ag weather outlook. Well, it's been a sunny day here in Des Moines, a lot of blue sky out there, a few clouds rolling in now and then, but again, temperatures cooler technically, even though 90 is still pretty warm. It's a lot cooler than it was, but it looks like things could cool down even more. We'll have to see what the National Weather Service has in store for the next 24 hours. Well, the sun was out here in Des Moines throughout most of the day, as it was across a lot of the state, with the exception of the southwestern part of the state where they saw some showers starting to move in already. Those temps are starting to slowly drop from that direction as well, as we saw highs anywhere from the low 80s to around 90. Now tonight there'll be mostly clear skies, variably cloudy skies, but those showers are going to start to press in from the southwest and start to move their way across the state, and we'll see lows of about the mid to upper 60s. And tomorrow, cooler temps will be coming in from the west. It'll take a little longer over on the east side of the state to cool off, but we'll see some showers and thunderstorms building across the state some more, and highs in the low 80s to around 90. Looking at the affiliate weather map, Cherokee will see showers and thunderstorms in 88. Shenandoah and Des Moines both showers and thunderstorms and high of 83. Actually, Albia is the same as well. Waterloo will see showers and a possibility of a thunderstorm and a high of 85. Clinton will start out mostly sunny. We'll start to see those showers and thunderstorms build, though, as the day goes on. They'll reach a high of 90. And that's been a check of the Ag Weather Outlook. And just like that, we're at the end of today's show. We thank you for joining us. You can find all our content online at iowaagnet.com. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, and also on YouTube, where you can find all of our video content as well as past episodes of AM/PM. So don't forget to subscribe to that and get the like button so that way you can get notifications every time we post a video. Don't forget about our twice daily free market podcasts. You can get them on Podbean, Spotify, Amazon, Apple, and Google. From the IRN studios in Des Moines, I'm Dustin Huffman. For Riley Smith and Avery Haskell, we thank you for watching. This has been Ag Matters PM.